And typically these interviews go on with a filmmaker. We talk about the film and the making of the film and how the story came together and so forth. But in this case, we have you who were actually in the film, so we got to see you a little bit before. It's interesting. You are, for the audience that doesn't know, you are a journalist. Yes?
I was at one time. I'm actually in law school now,
Yes.
but yes, I have some background there, of course.
Yes, and you and your grandfather created a prize at Rice University. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we worked together.
We've lost you.
Oh, sorry, everybody.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
Yeah, so we worked together to improve the Texas education system. I think it's pretty clear in the film. My grandfather came up from basically nothing, right? He grew up, in the Heights, which was not the best neighborhood in Houston, Texas. And he had nothing but a public school education all the way through. And, he really believes in improving Texas schools. And so that's what we do, with the Rather Prize. I just think it's another part of him, giving back to this country. He's really a patriot and believes in it so strongly.
So the prize is for what purpose in education? What is the prize given for?
Yeah, so it awards the best ideas in Texas education. We really solicit programs from teachers, from students, from people who are learning in and working in Texas schools. Kind of what the best ideas that they see. It's very much a bottom-up approach, and we award it every year at South by Southwest in Austin, and really, again, encourage people to submit, what they think of as ideas that can really, help out their fellow teachers and students down there in Texas.
Oh, that sounds wonderful, and it sounds very much like him. And you say you were a journalist, but now you're in law school. Are you planning to go into politics? What's the plan?
No interest in politics. I'm in my third year of law school, still figuring out what the next step would be. I worked for a little while for the Rachel Maddow show at MSNBC, and so that was my background in journalism. Loved it there, great people, but then saw a chance to go into law, which is something I'm really excited about, and graduating in the spring, hopefully, so fingers crossed.
Well, good luck to you. So let's talk about the film for a minute. What I found really fascinating about it was not only about your grandfather, but also just a touchstone for the development and the history of television and media and news and what's happened. I'm old enough that I sort of came up with all those stories that he covered, and how the relationship to television our relationship to television and to news and to government all changed through after Kennedy. And they talked about how the relationship of the American public to television changed after the Kennedy coverage, and then it changed again. And the approach to war changed after the Vietnam coverage. And so it kept going, and then as we saw it emulsify into the many disparate sources. And interestingly, Ailes was introduced right back at the beginning when he was advising Nixon, which I saw, okay, I see this coming. And where we are now, he was there for all of it, and actually to be morphing into a master of Twitter. I mean, I had no idea because I don't follow Twitter, but now I will, just to see what he's doing. So, do you think that the film? You've grown up with him. You're commenting on it. You've seen the film a few times, I'm guessing.
I have.
Yeah, and do you think it represents the man fairly, the man you know, in addition to all this history that comes along with it?
I do. I mean, we had no making in the creation of this film. I saw it for the first time, basically in the edit, that has now gone out that everyone saw tonight. I do think it captures him accurately. He is someone who has always, just wanted to report the truth and has sort of, adapted to whatever the times have said. I mean, he started out as a radio reporter, back in the 1950s. And then, as you pointed out in your question, shifted to television and covered a lot of different eras, when television was big. And now that social media is where most people get their news, that's what he's pivoted to as well. I think that he's a storyteller. He's someone who wants to find the facts, wants to tell the truth. And I think the film does a really excellent job of really getting to that part of him, as well as, sort of the humility and the family and the sort of, genteel style, that he brings in his personal life. I really do think that the film does an excellent job of getting, really at that core. So I was really impressed, when I saw it, that it was able to capture that part of him.
Well, I think it does, and I think it captures how in sync he was with the original values. I mean, a lot of the supporting interviews with Ronan Farrow and with all the producers that he worked with and other people in commenting on it, talked about issues of that the job is a question of public trust, that you have to bear witness, you can't be an activist, those tensions that exist, but wanting to be an activist but not being allowed to. And Ronan Farrow's talking about the public trust. They're talking about the Fourth Estate needing a free press, needing to be adversarial, needing to be on the outside. And he believed in all those things and was representative of them in such a great way that I think the film ties that together beautifully. And at the end, family. So growing up, was he an influence on you wanting to become a journalist or thinking about journalism?
He's been an incredible influence on me, but I think more than anything, just as a person. I mean, this is someone who, even when I was growing up, he was on the evening news every night, and he would always make time to, find ways to come to my Little League games. He's a really big believer in the idea of just remaining steady, right? Of never getting too high, never getting too low. He actually has a Substack now that's called Steady, which I think is a great name, because that's really, I think, what he believes more than anything. And I actually think the film gets to that pretty well as well, that he's had to remain steady through all kinds of different, certainly stories and even things that have happened to him, tremendous highs and even some lows. So he really kind of imparted that idea on me. I like to think that I try to live up to that as much as I possibly can. I'm really lucky to have him as a grandfather, sure, because of, who he is, to the American people and around the world. But more than anything, just he's an extremely high quality person. And I really appreciate, sort of the model that he's been for me growing up here.
Well, certainly the values are implicit in what you're saying, and his values are rock steady. So, and the after all the flaps, the different things with the Bush fight, and then the bad reporting, still remaining steady. And I think that the filmmaking was excellent in that way, because they brought up steady early on, what his father used to say to him after he was having rheumatic fever, and that circles back to the very end, the steady, and then the fact of courage, which also comes back at the end, which they introduce that awkward sign-off of his, but it becomes the very real and deeply felt sign-off at the end, when he has his last sign-off at CBS. So I just think a remarkable man and a remarkable film that got made. When you were interviewed, how did that fall in the process? Do you know?
Yeah, so I mean, I was just contacted by the filmmakers, and they said, would you do this? And of course, I checked with my family. At this point, my grandfather had already done. He did a couple of different interviews. I think maybe he had one more remaining. At that point, and they asked me again to sort of just talk about him, as a person more than anything. I talked about him fly fishing a lot. I was glad to see, that made it into the film, because he really does love to fish. But more than anything, I mean, I just think our whole family, we feel very fortunate that, again, the film got to, who he was as a person more than anything. There's certainly plenty of material. Very few people have lived as well documented a life as someone who was on, the evening news in 60 Minutes, probably 6 nights a week, at his prime. But I think to get to him as a person, was a really an admirable. They did an admirable job by the filmmakers here, and we were really pleased to see that.
I think it was spectacular. I think we have time if anybody in the audience would like to ask Martin any questions. Do we have questions for people here? Okay. If I'm not seeing anybody, please tell me. Oh, we do right here. Wait for a microphone. You got it?
Hello. So the film went into a little bit of detail about the George Bush scandal, and they mentioned this producer named, I believe, Mary Mapes, and I could be mistaken on this, but I thought I saw her name listed in their opening credits as one of the producers, and in the film it mentions how he wouldn't, throw under the bus, as they say, to kind of preserve his reputation. So I'm kind of curious I don't know if you're aware of this, but was he forgiving towards the people in his team who perhaps fed him bad information? Was he able to maintain friendships or working relationships with them afterwards, or was that kind of ruined by the scandal that him and his team were involved in?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. I would say this about my grandfather. He's big into loyalty. And I do think the film, as you pointed out, sort of touches upon that. It's hard to go so far in depth, in an hour and a half, but, he refused to sort of turn on his team. I think he viewed himself, kind of as maybe the captain or, a leader, of that group. And at the end of the day, it's his words, that go on television, on 60 Minutes, for that story. And so, my understanding is, that he has been able to maintain relationships, with the people who are on that team. I don't know kind of the specific intricate details of it, especially as it relates to the film. But, I do know that, he views himself as very loyal, and, he never went out in public and criticized and said, oh, my producers didn't fact check, or, X, Y, and Z. That's not the kind of person that he is. And honestly, again, it goes kind of back to the point of values and of family and of being a model. And, again, why I feel so lucky is that, he's just not the kind of person who would do that. And so, no matter how high the heat got for him, he never did that after that story. And, I just think, again, that has served as a nice model for me at the very least.
Yeah, and they did say, or his producer said in the film that, yes, the people around him should have done the deep dive. He trusted them to have done it, but it was also his job, and I think he acknowledged that the buck stopped with him, and so he wasn't going to make hay out of somebody else's misfortune or irresponsibility. Do we have any other questions for Martin? If I'm not seeing them. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and to talk about this great film and about your grandfather.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
And if you happen to talk to him, tell him that Sag Harbor loves him, okay?
I will.
Sag Harbor loves him very much. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, everybody.